Okay, thanks very much, and it's a real pleasure to have a chance to talk with you. Can you hear me okay? I think I'm on now. And I've got about 7 minutes to talk about writing a manuscript. Maybe we're going to take 8 or 9. This is very much directed at the cohort, the students here and the postdocs. Certainly you've got a lot of expert faculty in the audience that are equally well or even more qualified than myself to give you some tips. But there's a lot to talk about in manuscript writing, and so let's try to take it from the beginning. And if I were advising, I heard there's a lot of first-year students here, and if I were advising young authors, I'd say the mindset you want to have at the start is not put a pressure on yourself. You know, your goal is to take your data, write the best paper possible. It's not like you're going to have a science paper or an Angevana paper or a Jack's paper. Sit down and just write a paper. Do the best job. Usually while you're writing it, it'll actually improve. I usually underestimate my papers and where they're, you know, the caliber where I'm going to send them off, and I'm a step lower. And when I'm done, I say, hey, that's a better product than I thought I'd have. And then in terms of dividing writing tasks, I'm here talking about a full paper mode because other people talk a little more about communications and things, but you're going to do dissertation chapters. Those are like full papers. And if I had to divide, first of all, you want to divide your writing tasks. And usually I'd say to anyone to write your results section first, more or less together with the experimental section, because these are the two things that really have to agree. And you have to have a correlation between the two. And then after you've got that started, roughen your introduction, roughen your discussion, and then there's a balancing act that comes after that, because your introduction or discussion could have redundant aspects, like where are you going to talk about the earlier work? There might be some in the introduction, there might be some in the discussion. The deeper analysis, of course, in the discussion, but you can titrate that. It's kind of like a hyperspace linking between the two. And also, results and discussion is another balancing act. I always teach people to separate those two. You're welcome to put them back together later in your life, or your advisor might like to do it that way, but I always teach a student running through the group how to separate the two, because if you just write a straight up results section, it's going to be a little dull, a little dry. But you want to preserve a discussion section usually, because that's where you're going to throw things that might not be true 10 years from now. And almost all of chemistry, we're postulating models. So you're modeling your data by some overarching theory. And maybe, just maybe, your model is going to be wrong in 10 years. You're going to have another experiment. You're going to have to throw out your model and revise it. So you want to put your more speculative things into the discussion, but you want to also sneak a little bit of discussion into the results. I mean, you can say bond A is longer than bond B. That's discussion, but that's an unarguable, fact of a well-done crystal structure and things. And so supporting information is usually an extension of an experimental section, so we don't have to see a lot more there. Conclusive sections are optional, and definitely should not be redundant. Always try to worry about redundancy between these sections. And you see a little more conclusion sections in papers where there's combined results and discussion section. And then we talked a little bit about abstracts this morning. I just say save it for the last. It's one of your hardest pieces of writing to do a classical abstract, and you want to have your full deck of cards before you're getting into that. Okay, so that's a little bit on mechanics, on starting a manuscript, and let's go a little more deeper into mechanics. I would advise any student here to develop a uniform format for all your technical writing so that whatever you write is portable. There's a lot of publishers. ACS is one of them. You'll see templates. And once you start using templates, you're locked into a publisher's format. So I'm very much encouraging beginning authors to keep your papers in your own format. Try to make them portable so that you can move them in and out of grant proposals and things like that and other technical writing. And then as we get into writing, most of your writing stories about molecules. So molecules are very analogous to characters in a story or a novel, and you want to treat your molecules like you would people. They're your characters, you're making them, you're studying them, you're measuring them, and you can give them characteristics that will help your readers remember what the molecule is more than just using that abbreviation 2 or 3 or 4 all the time. So there's things you can do to make your papers more readable. We can't cover all of them today, but that's just one hint and trying to prick you to think more deeply about these subjects we just barely touch on. Instructions to authors also are important, but for many journals, these are poorly written, I'm sorry to say, and they do contain unnecessary steps. So I would say you want to go to the instructions to authors when you're at an advanced stage and when you're pretty certain where you're sending the journal. And you can consult your colleagues and your advisor for a little more guidance there, but don't get too bogged down. So now, another thing besides mechanics is from an editor's point, you want to score some style points. And your friend is the ACS Style Guide, and the more that you follow the ACS Style Guide, the more your paper from ACS editor's eyes is going to look professionally prepared, confidently prepared, and good prospects or better prospects for peer review. And I would pay a lot of attention to formatting in these style points because, again, there's thousands of common errors. We've got 7 or 8 minutes here. And one of my tips would be your chemicals. We just said how they're so important. They're your characters. And so make a list of them and always write them in the same way. If you're getting a hard copy of this, I've given you 5 different ways here to write the same phosphonium salt. And it's inexcusable to use all 5 in the course of a manuscript. Use one format, or maybe 2. Maybe you've got to use a different format in the graphic than from the text. And this unified format goes for everything, because when I see a beginning writer who worries about this type of stuff, I'm also more confident they're worrying about their data and the integrity of their data and the transcription of their data. So, you shouldn't have random, and we may have some corruptions here, and I'm sorry, this is a PC probably, and it's corrupted my, okay, but anyway, I've got here M with a big L versus M with a little l. Some journals do it one way, ACS does it this way. Be consistent. Don't go random back and forth. Don't go percentage without a space and percentage without a space. Don't go 0.5 hours versus 30 minutes. Think deeply about your formats. Everything, everything counts in terms of style here. And you've got new era things like there's multiplication signs now. Professor Engels and I were youngsters. We just put an X there, but that's not cool anymore. You got to use a multiplication sign, or there's new ways of doing minuses. And so there's a bunch of things there we could digress about, but I'm not going to go over my time limit. And so let me go right on to some pet points and peeves. The abstract should be self-contained. Okay, so somebody reading your classical abstract should be able to understand it without referring to a figure, without going and reading the text, and don't make it any longer than you have to. You don't have to define all your compound numbers. Only define the compound numbers you need within the abstract. Another very bad mistake, reference scheme, figure, or compound numbers incorrect. Never ever do that. There's significant digit errors. That's on the scientific side. It's another way to make a poor impression. There's thousands of them. Graphics not optimized for readability at single or down column width or ugly formula. This is a little advanced concept, but I think many of you from the comments I heard today are tuned to what good graphics mean, so don't send in crappy graphics or ugly graphics. We have an ugly, pretty contest. I can't, don't sugarcoat it. Ugly graphic is ugly. Don't even try to be constructive, it's ugly. Document not run through spell checker. That's, I get the feeling people don't know how to use them sometimes. And, for technical words, you're a pretty savvy group. I know you can download alternate dictionaries. And so use your spell checker. Also, bordering on ethics here. Never cite a reference that you have not personally read. Okay, that's another no-no. Sometimes it might be in a foreign language, or there might be a difficulty. Maybe sometimes you can substitute an abstract. And make sure in all your references that you've got the year, volume, page number, and all the author spelled, name spelled. Make sure that's 100% correct. Very important things can make a very negative impression in the peer review process. Okay, so last slide here, personal standards, thinking of all of you as writers. First of all, we're going to talk a little bit about ethics. Sonia's going to cover that and make sure that your authorship and all aspects of the manuscript conform to those standards. Based upon your experiences, develop your own manuscript style guide, proofing checklist, and keep it going throughout your career. This is just I've done it. I've got these things as handouts for my group. My group adds to them, so these are dynamic things. They'll change as our publishing platforms change and publishing traditions change. Compete with your research advisors and colleagues to see who can write something the most clearly and in the fewest words. Learn from these contests. I've learned from a lot of coworkers over 35 years who beat me, and the minute they beat me, I joined them, Analyze and learn from good writing wherever you find it. Bring new metaphors into the literature. I don't know how many traditional organic chemists we have here, but you can just tell those synthetic organic chemists, a new weapon in the chemist's arsenal, an assault on the northern hemisphere of some natural product. We've got all this military metaphors and things like that, and I hope your generation will bring in some more humanistic metaphors into our writing. And then finally, I'll steal something from Saint-Exupéry and also George Whitesides, who gave a lecture recently and he used this quote. And so when you've got your final dissertation or your final paper, you know that you've achieved perfection in it, not when you have nothing more to add, because it's not a contest of throwing in the kitchen sink, but when you have nothing more to take away. So once you've got that whole thing cooked, what can you take out? Like with this talk, went a couple minutes over, what could I took out to have the essence and the complete content? Well, probably could have thought of something. The same in your writing. Think about what you can take out to make it more user-friendly and the same amount of content in fewer words. Okay, Gus, over to you.